Hi, my name's Chris Hubbard. I'm here at the Boone County Conservation District blacksmith shop. And today we're going to talk about what a blacksmith does. Making it simple here, a blacksmith takes forgeable iron, heats it up, and beats it into something useful. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, historically, the old blacksmiths, say 200 years ago, what did they do? They made anything that you had in your home or your farm that was made from forgeable iron. So iron tires on a wagon, forks, knives in your kitchen, all those things. The blacksmith made it by hand. You couldn't just go to Walmart and buy this stuff. He would make it for you, and he would make it the way you wanted it done too. So historically, the old blacksmiths probably died out about the 1930s because they couldn't compete with modern machinery any longer. So you'll see that this takes a long time to do even the most basic technique. But what we're here to show you is how this works and how the blacksmith did what he did every day, say 12, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, rain, shine, heat, cold. Blacksmith was doing this kind of work. Hard, dirty work. That's why you call him a blacksmith. So what are my tools here? I have a hammer, I have an anvil that I pound my things on, and I have a forge. In the forge, we have coal. We're burning coal. You could use charcoal, but coal is more efficient. And with coal, I can heat up my piece to say 1700, 2000 degrees. I can heat it up to 3000 degrees and burn it up. But we don't want to do that. We want to keep it intact. So today, I'm going to give a little demonstration of how I would make, in this case, a fork. So this is like a kitchen fork. This is a fork, probably dates to the late 17, early 1800s. And so I have to look at this and ask myself, how would the old blacksmith have made this sort of thing? Well, I see here a straight line going to a pointed end here. And then I see the two tines on the outside have a meat here in the middle and then are coming out either end. So my idea is I should be able to take two pieces of metal and make them into this fork. So what will I start with? Two pieces of metal. Here is the long piece here, and here is the tines here, okay? So we're starting out with two pieces of mild steel. Traditionally, blacksmith would have used wrought iron, but wrought iron isn't made anymore. It's also fairly difficult to forge if you don't know what you're doing. So we're going to start in the next step down the way. I'm not going to do this from start to finish. It takes a long time. I've already forged out the tip here to this fork here, that portion here. And now I'm forging these two outer tines here. I've already forged out part of that. This part here is one side, and now I'm going to forge out or draw out this portion here for the other tine. And so I put it in my tongs here and stick it in the coal fire and heat it up. So every time the blacksmith made something, he had to go through repeated what we call heats. Heat the thing up to a red temperature or above, and then pound it out, and when it gets cold again, you put it back in the forge and heat it up again. So if you're a really good blacksmith, it takes less heats than if you're not. So amateur blacksmith takes a long time to make something. A really efficient professional smith takes less time. Still, the cost of an object wasn't how much time it took you to make. In the old days, say in the 1700s, it was how much the steel, or in this case, the wrought iron weighed. That was the important thing. Nowadays, it's our time it's valuable, not the materials. So I'm heating this thing up here in the coal forge. I have to blow air through the coal because if I don't, the fire will go out. And I need to get it up to a red heat, which is about, say, 1700 to 2000 degrees. Now, the old blacksmith shops were generally sort of dark inside. Why is that? Because that allowed them to tell how hot the piece was by looking at the color of it when they heated it up. So once it gets up to the temperature that I want to forge it at, I can see through the coal here. When it gets to be about that, I put it out here on the anvil, and then I So once it gets down to the point where it's not hot anymore, I quit. Because why do extra work? When it gets cold like that, it's more work than when it's hot. The other thing about a coal fire is you have to constantly work it. Make sure that it's still hot, make sure it doesn't have clinkers in it. That is the stuff that's left over after the coal's burned out. So I bring it out here, same thing. And as Lloyd, the smith before me, was pointing out, you draw things out square, then you make them into a octagon, and then you round them out if you want them to be round. You don't forge them out round. So as I was saying, the apprentice blacksmith back in the day, especially in Europe, apprenticeship took 7 years. The kid that became an apprentice, actually his parents signed a contract with the blacksmith. He was an indentured servant, and he agreed to stay with that smith for 7 years, in return of which the smith would teach him blacksmithing, maybe give him a pair of clothes or some tools to go out and start his own shop when it was all done. However, if that kid decided he didn't want to do this anymore and ran away, blacksmith could put out a bounty on him, bring him back. So now it's about the same length as this side here, and I've got it square, and I'm going to start to round it out now. So there are articles in old papers from the 1700s, advertisements saying that blacksmith apprentice ran off, we're putting out a bounty on him, we'll pay so much money to bring him back. One particular article said 2 apprentices ran off, and the blacksmith said one, he would pay maybe 100 shillings for that apprentice to come back. The other apprentice, he would give a bag of sawdust for him. Well, he wasn't worth anything. All right, so then we're going to next mark on that piece where we're going to put it on this piece here. And we're going to see if we can do a forge weld. Now, modern welding is done with an electric arc welding or gas oxyacetylene welding, something like that. In the old days, they didn't have any of that stuff. So they did what's called forge welding, where they would heat up a piece, put flux on it, and when it got to the right temperature, you would just simply push it together and it would molecularly bond the 2 pieces. And really takes a fair amount of time to learn how to do that, turns out. So, and also you need to have the heat just right. So this is not a forge I use every day. We'll see if we can make it happen. If it doesn't happen, I've got the next step already made, no problem. All right, so we're going to attempt to forge weld. This may or may not work. Doesn't matter, at least you'll see how it's supposed to work. So what I'm doing first is I heat up these 2 pieces to red hot temperature. I have my flux here, which is basically borax, and I put the flux onto the piece that I'm going to weld. Like that. That's one of them. And let's move this one over here. I want to get down inside the fire where there's not a whole lot of oxidation coming off from it. And I'll flux the other piece here, like that. And then just sort of cover this thing up, and I have to watch it carefully to see exactly when we get to welding temperature. So that didn't get it quite in the right spot, but you see how it works. It's welded. So normally what I would do here is to just straighten these things out like that. Okay, see, it's all stuck on there now. And do another weld just to make sure it's just right. But we're not going to mess with that right now. You get pretty much get the idea of how this works. So that's old-time forge welding, how everything was welded back then, and the old smiths were really good at that. All right, so let's move on to the next step. Here is the result from doing that. Okay, I've bent the two tines down the side, and now I'm going to, see this part here on this fork is sort of widened out here, so we're going to forge that part of it next. Put this in here. And get that all hot. Okay, so we've got that all hot. We flatten it out like this. But I always want to even up the sides in both cases, like that. Okay, let's do that one more time. Get it nice and flat. Again, each time we do a heat, it takes a few minutes to heat it up on the forge. So that's time the blacksmith just standing around waiting for that to happen. So the idea is the more skilled you are as a smith, the more work you can get done in a single heat. So I've been to demonstrations with really, really good smiths, and they can just about make everything in one heat, which is amazing. And so that's for those of us who have been doing this a long time. I've been doing this for 30 years. Still, I don't do it for a living. There's always something to learn. It's amazing how much there is to learn when you're doing this sort of thing. So when you learn to do smithing like this, there's a lot you don't see me doing, and a lot that the apprentice has to learn when he's learning it. The angle of my hammer relative to the anvil is important. The angle of the piece relative to the anvil is important. All that determines just how the metal moves and allows me to make this into the shape that I want in the end. But that's the hard thing for an apprentice or a beginner to learn, is all those little subtle things that you can't see just looking at me doing this. So as I was mentioning to some of the people earlier, if you take a class in blacksmithing, of course this is the kind of thing that you learn, but it looks simple. And so when people actually start doing it, they start realizing how difficult it really is and how long it takes to learn it. Okay, now we're going to even this thing up a little bit more. Then, next thing we're going to do is put some of these little grooves here. So we're going to put this on here on the anvil and then put some little decorative cuts in it like this, just to make it interesting. It has no function at all. But the old smith would always do something like this because they had pride in their work. So what's the next step? Well, if we look at our fork here, this is sort of narrower than this part here. So we're going to round off some of that. I'm not going to do it the whole way up. Then we're going to make the handle. Actually, what we're going to do, we would normally just forge this out a little thinner. We're going to start making the handle on this end. Okay, now we're going to work on that wide part of the handle. Always work both sides of the piece. So now we've got this wide part like that. Hold on a minute. Like this, okay? And we're going to make a little hook for it now, because you always want to be able to hang it up. And now we'll loop it around. Now I could put a little decorative hook on the end of it, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to loop it around the anvil horn here to make our and there is the hook that goes on the end of it to hang it up. So I finished a piece completely like this. I moved pretty fast on this one. This is basically the same kind of fork that I was making here, sort of a trident. Good for hot dogs. Actually, these long forks were called flesh forks. People would cook meat over fire, especially in colonial times when you had a giant fireplace. And there are all kinds of forks like this, all kinds of designs. This is the basic way that they made them. So that's basically how a blacksmith works, what he does. Historically speaking anyway, there are modern blacksmiths today usually making decorative pieces or doing demos for you like me. So thank you for stopping by, and stop by again when we have the blacksmith shop open.